Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sneha and today I'm going to be sharing all about the new Viseart Petit Force palette. This one is in chocolate and this is praline. So if you'd like to see swatches, some eye looks using these two palettes, also look at some comparisons with existing shades in my Viseart collection, and finally a review on these palettes, then please continue watching. So Viseart recently launched 4 of these little Petit 4 palettes. So there's 2 more, one which is more like a rosy kind of a theme, which is I believe framboise. And then there's another one which is lilas, which is more of a cool toned gray taupey kind of a palette. But both of those either seem to be too light of shade for my skin tone, or I didn't particularly gravitate towards those shades. So these are the 2 that I picked up, chocolate and praline. Now these retail for £18 here in the UK and you get 6 grams of products, which means that each of the eyeshadow pans in here contain 1.5 grams of eyeshadow. This is what the outer packaging looks like. Beautiful cardboard packaging, and on the back right here you get the names of the eyeshadows. Now when you open up, this is the actual palette. Really tiny and cute, and the colors correspond to each of the different palettes. So this one is chocolate. Let me get the praline one out. You can see that the colors are different. On the back you get the names of the palettes. And let me just get one of them to open. So this right here is magnetized, if you can hear that. And then the palette opens like this, very similar to the Petit Pro's packaging, just that you did not have a mirror, which I'm happy about because I never use the mirrors in the Petit Pro's anyway. So these are the 4 pans that you get. Initially, I thought this might be the same size as the full-size palettes in terms of the individual pans, but these are actually smaller. So as I was saying, in terms of pan size, this is the size that you're looking at when you buy the Petit Pro palettes. This is right next to it is from the new Petit Force. So you can see that it is up in size. So the Petit Pros contained 1 gram of eyeshadow, whereas the new Petit Force contain 1.5 grams of product. And this one, compare it to a regular Viseart eyeshadow pan, which contains 2 grams of eyeshadows. There you go. Petit Force, and then regular Viseart pans. In terms of size, this one is closest to the pan size in the Libertine palette, any of those palettes which have this kind of a metal packaging on the outside and contain 9 eyeshadows. So it's the closest in size to this, and this contains 1.55 grams of products, so they're pretty similar. In terms of sizing, so let's compare the new Petit Force with the original Petit Pro. So you can see it's slightly wider, the new one, and also shorter than the Petit Pros. In comparison to the Libertine, this is the size of the palette, about say 60% of the size. And then comparing it with the regular one, you can see that it's slightly taller than 2 rows of that pan, so like 4 eyeshadows right here, slightly taller than that, just because of the outer packaging. Now let's look at the shades up close. So first let's start with praline. These are the 4 shades you get. This first shade right here is called Sucre. It's a beautiful satin eyeshadow. This one right here on the top is called Caramelize. It's a beautiful light shimmer which has like little flecks of glitter in it. The matte shade in this palette is called Pecan. And then the last shade, which is right here, it's a beautiful, almost cool toned bronze. I absolutely love that. And that's the shade called Praline. And that one also has like larger glitter flecks running through it. So that's something I've noticed in these shimmer eyeshadows compared to regular Viseart eyeshadows. Although this one right here is smooth, this one and this one right here, both of them tend to have slightly, not large glitter flecks, but you do see glitter flecks. Especially when you apply it on the eyes, you can tell a difference when applied dry. Like the first day I used, which is yesterday, I used the Praline palette and I didn't realize that the glitter flecks would kind of fall down onto the cheekbones. So today when I used the chocolate palette, I did use a mixing medium to avoid that. And if I come in closer, hopefully you can see that. You can see those little glitter flecks that I'm talking about. In this particular shade, it's like a gold shimmer under really warm rusty orange kind of a shade. So that's what I'm talking about if you want to prevent fallout and also get intense payoff and also keep the glitter flakes on the eyes, I would highly recommend using a mixing medium. The one I've used today is by Mehron, but Isa mixing medium is also great for this. So I consider the Praline one to be more of a neutral eyeshadow palette. And then the next one, which is Chocolate, is definitely warm toned, as you can see from the eye look that I've created. So these are the 4 shades in the Petite Force Chocolate. The first matte shade right here is Cafe Cream. The one next to it is Peaches. Beautiful shimmer. At the bottom row, you have this beautiful matte called Ganache, which is stunning for the chocolate palette. And then lastly, we have this peachy orange kind of a shade, which is called Orange Sanguine. Beautiful color story. I really like that they incorporated 2 mattes in here, which is like a nice balance between mattes and shimmers, which is what my personal preference is. In comparison, because the Praline has only 1 matte right here, you have to kind of use that and then use the other shimmers around it to create a look. So it's much more softer, if that makes sense, because it's just 1 medium toned matte shade. So if you're around my skin tone and you already have other eyeshadow palettes, you're looking for something just as an addition for, say, an everyday neutral kind of a look, I would go with Praline, which has 1 matte and 3 shimmers, and it creates a very soft look, as you'll see in the demo in a bit. Whereas if you're of my skin tone or slightly deeper skin tone as well, I would recommend the chocolate one, because I don't think the Praline one will probably show up on deeper skin tones and it might look a little ashy. So chocolate is definitely the way to go for deeper skin tones. And if you're of a similar skin tone as mine, chocolate is amazing if you like warm toned eyeshadows like this. Also, if you're a pro artist, definitely make use of the pro discount on these palettes. I ended up getting them for about £14 each. So each eyeshadow comes to only about £3.5, which is a steal, especially considering the quality of Viseart eyeshadows. I've used both palettes yesterday and today, and I've not had any issues in terms of the quality. The quality in terms of the eyeshadows, the matte eyeshadows blend exceptionally well, like typical Viseart eyeshadows, which you come to expect from them. The shimmers, some are the same quality, like this shade right here from the Praline palette, but most of the shimmers in these newer palettes seem to have a fine layer of like micro glitter running through them, which I like, but there is a little bit of learning curve to it. So don't expect to apply it all over your eyelids dry and then not see glitter flecks falling down on your cheekbones throughout the day. You will get to see that if you apply it dry. So I highly recommend using a mixing medium. So as you can see, I've used it today. I mean, this is obviously my highlight, but otherwise I don't have any major glitter flecks on my cheek area. Let's get on with the tutorials. The first one will be the look with the palette Praline, and the second one will be this one, which is with the palette Chocolate. So starting with the first look using the palette Praline, I'm going to start with primed eyelids, and the primer I've used is the NARS Pro Prime eyeshadow base. I'm first going in with a blending brush and using the only matte shade from the palette, which is Pecan. I'm going to apply that into the crease of my eye, blending it up towards my brow bone. And then I'm just switching to a smaller blending brush and applying the same shade along my bottom lash line. And then here I'm just connecting it at the outer corner with the color meeting at the crease. Then I'm using a flat brush by Isam. This is W21. And I'm going to use the shade Praline. And I'm going to apply that on the outer half of my eyelid. I'm using the shade Dry. Then I went in with the shade Sucre and applied it to the inner half of my top eyelid. And then lastly, to finish off this look, I used the shade Caramelize in the inner corner of my eye and also as my brow bone highlighter. And I've just completed the makeup with mascara off camera. On my cheeks, I have the Flower Beauty Blush Balm in the shade Cinnamon. And on my lips, I have a combination of this Collagen Lip Oil from Beauty Pie in the shade Cheerio, and the Beauty Pie lip liner in the shade Foxy, and then lastly the Lisa Eldridge lipstick in the shade Velvet Affair. And this is the finished look. Very soft and wearable. And this is what it looks like in studio lighting. And this is how soft it looks in natural daylight. I'm pleasantly surprised with the palette Praline. I was skeptical if these shades would show up on me, but I'm glad they are, and in a really soft way. Next, let's move on to the palette Chocolat. I'm first using the shade Cafe Cream on a large blending brush and using this in my crease and also as my transition shade. I'm also going to run this along my bottom lash line. And again, just connecting it at the outer V. Then I'm using a flat brush. This is by eSIM W21. And I'm using the dark brown shade from the palette called Ganache. And I'm going to pack it on the outer V of my eye. I'm also going to take a little bit on the outer 1/3 of my lower lash line. And then switching brushes to a small blending brush. And then blending the edges of this eyeshadow and also taking it slightly more into the inner portion of the crease. Then going back into the blending brush to take away any harsh edges. And then once I'm happy with that, went in with the shade Orange Sanguine. And I'm using the shade Damp just because it has micro shimmer in it. And I'm using the Mehron mixing medium for this. And applying it with that same flat brush onto the eyelid. And you can see that since it's applied damp, you can actually see the little glitter flecks on the eyelid. Also going to run the same shade along the inner portion of the bottom lash line. And then as my inner corner highlight, I'm using the shade Peaches. Again, using it damp with whatever mixing medium I had left over on the palette. And then off camera, I went ahead and applied mascara to my top and bottom eyelashes. On my cheeks, I had the same blush as yesterday, which is the Blush Bomb by Flower Beauty in the shade Cinnamon. And on my lips, I have a combination of this Makeup Forever Artist Pencil in the shade 706, and then a Pat McGrath lipstick. This is the shade Fever Dreams. And that completes this look. Very warm tone, yet beautiful look, especially for this time of the year. Next, let's look at if we have some repeat shades or shades that are similar in these, looking at all my existing Viseart collection. So I didn't find many replicates. I just found it for 4 shades from the palettes. So let's go through them. Let's look at the Petit Force Chocolate palette first. So I didn't really find any dupes for this particular shade. The others were either too yellow or more peachy in tone. Next, let's move on to the second shade, which is Peaches. This is what that looks like. And one that I found a little similar, especially in terms of texture, is the shade from the Spritz Edit palette. Get that right here. So that's what they look like on the finger. So if I were to swatch those two, this is from the new Petit Force palette. And then this is from Spritz Edit palette. You can see that the formula is quite similar, just that the Spritz one is more golden, whereas the Petit Force Chocolate one is a little bit more like orangey pink kind of a tone. So that's the first one. Next, for the Orange Sanguine shade, it's not exactly same, but one that's similar I felt was the shade from the Petit Pro Chou Chou palette. So let's look at this one. Just that one right there. And this one from the Chou Chou. They have that peachy golden kind of tone. So this is from the new palette. And this is from the Chou Chou palette. The one from Chou Chou is definitely more peachy gold compared to this one, which is a peach, but it has like gold micro shimmer through it. And then lastly, for the matte, which is Ganache, the one that I found closest was from the Warm Mattes palette. This is shade number 10. So let's swatch those. This is the new palette. This is the Warm Mattes palette. So Petit Force Chocolate. And then Warm Mattes 10. So if I intensify the new one, slightly more cool toned than the Warm Mattes one, but they're kind of similar if you can see that. So those are all the shades that are kind of similar to the Petit Force Chocolate. Next, for the Petit Pro Praline, I didn't really find any dupes for these amazing shimmer shades on the palette, but I do have some shades that are kind of similar to this, but they may have slightly different undertones. The first shade is this one right here from the Viseart Libertine palette. So that's the one from Praline. This is from the Libertine palette. Just going to swatch them right here. So this is from the Praline palette. This is from the Libertine palette. Very, very similar. Just that the one from Libertine palette has a more purple undertone, whereas this one has a more yellow kind of an undertone. Next, we have two shades from the Grande Pro 1 palette. This is shade number 4 from the palette, and this is shade number 9 from the palette. So I'm going to swatch these two next. And then lastly, we also have one from Neutral Mattes, which is shade number 8. But as you can see, this one is definitely more purple or pink in undertone compared to this one. But I'll swatch it nevertheless. So Grande Pro number 4. There you go. More similar to that than the first shade we did. Then we have Grande Pro number 9. This I would say is the most similar to the new shade, Praline. And then going back to swatch the Neutral Matte shade, that is number 8. This one is definitely more purple toned. You can see that. So those are all the shades that are potentially similar. And I would say if you have the Grande Pro 1, the shade number 9 is very, very similar to Praline. In summary, I feel like these palettes are amazing. They're a beautiful addition to the Viseart family of eyeshadows. And I like that these are little bite-sized palettes, so you don't have to really think about picking eyeshadows when you create a look. So everything is included in the little quad right here. And I love that all the eyeshadows, like the previous palettes, are removable. So you get these notches on the eyeshadows. So you can remove these and put it into an empty palette while traveling. Say you want just one shade from here, you can do that. Or you can rearrange the eyeshadows in the palette. Say you have more than one of these, you can mix and match to create your own palette. And as I mentioned before, the quality of the mattes is very consistent with previous Viseart eyeshadows that I have. So beautiful blendability and pigmentation is amazing. The only major difference that I've noticed is that some of the shimmers in these newer palettes contain like a light layer of micro glitter running through them. It's not something new. They also have this in some of the older palettes. So Muse, Sultry Muse, if you have that, you know that some of these shades have micro glitter through them. So it's quite similar to those. Or even the Koi palette, some of them do have micro shimmer running through them. So these are quite similar to those. If you enjoyed watching the tutorials and the review, definitely give this video a like and also consider subscribing for more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!